Hello, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Ari Hirschberg, Community Practice Lead at the Exchange Lab. This month I'm talking with Jillian Carruthers, Senior Director, Digital Services and Business Alignment for the sixth and final segment on the learner's journey, how the experience of getting results will change an organization. I've been fortunate to work with Jillian and her teams for the past few years, and I'm a big fan of Jillian and her work. Every time we are in an online meeting or a room together, she is full of creative ideas to develop and maximize the potential for others. These aren't just creative ideas for the sake of being creative. When Jillian shares an idea, she is ready to move forward and make the idea into reality. Her energy, enthusiasm, and collaborative nature always brings me in. It's an absolute pleasure to create and build with her. If you've ever been fortunate enough to be around one of Jillian's teams, you'll notice the same enthusiasm, energy, and collaborative nature in maximizing the potential for others. I believe teams are a reflection of their leaders, and Jillian's teams are a testament to Jillian as a leader. So, welcome, Jillian. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Great. I have some questions for you.
Let's do it.
What does setting expectations mean to you?
I think it's a loaded one. I think we often, as soon as you hear that, it gets a bit of a bad rap. Sometimes you think, oh, setting expectations, that's all about cutting scope or knocking something down or, telling people you're not going to achieve what you set out to do. So for me, what it means is being really transparent about what we're actually doing, what we're going to deliver, what we're going to build, what our barriers are, and almost to the point where we're oversharing a little bit about what we think is important and what we think are either our leadership or our stakeholders or our users should think is key as well. So to me, it's actually about creating that bond of trust and that really, really, really good relationship with the people that we're working with so that we can actually be really clear about what we can deliver. And then I think to the topic here, it's about delivering on what we said we were going to do. So it's that full circle of being clear about what we can do and then actually delivering on what we said we were going to do.
And that sets your team up right away for a strong culture to grow.
Absolutely. It sits them in a place where they can feel comfortable to make decisions and they feel open and they feel like they have the connection with the people that they're delivering to so that they have a safe space to create and be creative. And without that, you risk being a quote unquote traditional, maybe IT project that doesn't deliver on what you said you were going to deliver because maybe it changed for a good reason.
Yeah. We've discussed our mutual admiration of Brené Brown. Tell me how you have utilized some of her teachings.
Oh, well, this one is, so Aaron, who is one of our product owners, so he manages the day-to-day work of one of our digital teams. Aaron and I really early kind of bonded over our mutual love of Brené Brown and her teachings and on a couple things. One was just the idea about, being direct is kind. And I think it was more, being clear is kind, being unclear is unkind. And we challenged ourselves really early as a team to start having those hard conversations. She likes to call them the rumbles, but we kind of just adopted our direct is kind. And being honest with our team when sometimes it was really hard. So talking to them about how we weren't satisfied with the results we might be getting, or how we didn't think the direction we were going was ideal, or how we saw behavior that we didn't think was modeling what our team culture was. But not letting that slide, not letting that sit for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, but actually addressing it at the time that it occurred was absolutely crucial to our success. The other piece is just around authenticity. So finding what you're really good at. I know for Aaron, when he came in, he was a mines inspector. So he brought this mining experience and understanding with him, but he didn't maybe have that technical knowledge to run a digital team. So we were able to really work together by just owning what our own skills were, owning what we did well, and then sharing back and forth between each other in a really authentic way. And sometimes it was pointing on the vulnerable side because it was new to both of us.
To your first point on that, What was it like in the beginning when you were being authentic with your team? It must have been a little rough in the beginning. I'm sure not everyone, as much as people like authenticity, it's got a hit.
Absolutely. And I think it was out of place for a lot of people. They were expecting, come in, command control, like lay out the scope, do the thing that you were told to do. And it was uncomfortable, I think, for all of us. We worked through it in a kind of a team bonding way, in the sense that we went back and forth. We would share what we thought was important. It would maybe not get received as well, and then we'd reflect on it. And it really fed in, to be honest, to that 2-week agile sprint cycle that we work in, where every 2 weeks we had dedicated time to sit back and reflect on how our interactions with each other worked and maybe how we could change it. And I know we all learned a ton in that space.
Yeah, the 2-week forced sprint review, that's a great opportunity to keep going after your team to figure out how to get better and better as a team and get more authentic.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really challenges them to think back and be reflective and really understand their strengths and maybe where their limitations are.
That's really neat. The 2-week sprints are an excellent way to stay close with your team and clients. What are your thoughts on the time frame?
The 2-week time frame is crucial. It lets us develop a plan that's right-sized enough that, again, we can set those expectations really clearly about what we're going to deliver in that time frame. But we don't go down any weird paths. So as a leader, I don't have to be there day to day with what the team's doing all the time. I can sit back and know that if I'm attending a demo or a review, or I'm part of that cadence every 2 weeks, we're able to course correct if something's not going the way that we expected it. The other things is it lets us build in things incrementally and really take our users' feedback into consideration. So what we thought we might build in 4 weeks might not happen, or we might change the way it is, because during that 2-week cycle, we were able to actually have conversations that were important that changed our thoughts on the tool that we were developing. And we can address that quickly rather than it being, 6 months or 2 years or 5 years out of date. I know I actually had a conversation today with a more traditional project, and that project manager actually said, we're working off a dashboard, and we had lots of conversations, and it was about 2.5-3 years ago, and we're going to build that tool. Well, that's unheard of in this landscape, and that's why that 2-week is so important, because everything has changed. Even you look at the pandemic, everything has changed in a matter of months. Not to mention 2 years.
Yeah, I can't imagine 2 years. Everything would have changed.
Exactly. Yeah. So that cycle and that cadence is so important for, one, it builds culture, it builds the team's confidence, it lets them get feedback, they can deliver results in those 2 weeks. We work on end to end, so we don't just build something that might be something later. We build something that is something at the end of the sprint so that you can show it, and maybe it's to a user, maybe it's just an internal tool that the developers are using, but you can balance that and see the result and then pivot.
I think of the word failure a lot, but we also use the word continuously improve. So when this kind of thing happens, how long does it take for people to figure out it's not really a failure, it's just another way to get closer, like to really feel that, imbibe that in them?
Yeah, usually not very long. I think it took us, I would say as a team, it took us about 6 months to get our feet underneath it. And that brings up a key point about teams and keeping teams together and building team cohesion, and not sort of just taking a team apart, building it back up, and then, we got some money, we're going to add 2 or 3 more resources. So you get to that level of resiliency and that level of ability to see those pieces and respond and start to see those mistakes, quote unquote, as learning opportunities. And that happens with trust being built within the team. And it's so important to keep that team together to build that trust, because when you're breaking it apart, you just don't get that.
Yeah. What does talking to your team and clients mean to you?
For us, it's we're making tools for them, right? We're talking to them as much as we can possibly talk to we're building something for not just one person, we're building something for 5 or 10 or 15 or 200 or the public writ large. So having meaningful conversations where people feel comfortable that they can share what they really feel, not just what they've been told they should feel, all comes together in a way that we can then package that back into that 2-week sprint cycle. So to me, it's about making sure people feel safe enough to tell us the stories that they need to in order to share what's going to work best for them. It's about being broad and not being selective in who we pick. So looking at who can we talk to in a broad audience. So we're not getting one perspective. We're not building one thing for one view. I think that's probably the key pieces for us.
And with the every 2-week sprint, are the users in the beginning surprised that they're getting that much, like really, they're getting utilized all the time?
Absolutely. I know one of our recent stats was our user researcher talks to someone 4.2 times per week. So on average, he's having almost a conversation every single working day. And at first, people were surprised that we were talking to them so early. Then they were surprised that we were talking to them and they could see what they'd talked about within 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. And then they started to think about, okay, well, what's next? How do I start thinking about how we might solve this problem? How do I start thinking about my future roadmap and how I can build that back into what the team's developing and building? So their response really iterated as we did over the last 2.5 years. And we built this culture, I call it the culture of how might we, where we now have a group of engaged users that ask questions like, how might we do blah, blah, blah? Not coming to us with, their heads hung low and a piece of paper that had a requirement that they've been asking for 4 years, and they're pretty sure we're not going to do it, and they're probably never going to see it, and they're just they feel like they're low. We now have this engaged, active, and really, really positive group of people that are happy to participate day after day.
Yeah, like excited to participate. Okay, so that's skin in the game. How long does it, if there is a time, how long does it usually take for people who are their users for the first time in this way to go, okay, I get this. They actually really want my opinion and it's really valuable?
I think it has to be that first time you show someone something that they contributed to. So the first time this happened for us was we were working on something really simple, which was a summary of a mine page. And this was all within the first 3 weeks or 3 months of our project. And in those 3 months, we were talking to people and they weren't bought in on the way we were doing this yet. They had no idea. And then all of a sudden, we showed them at a demo what they'd actually asked for. And it was, you could almost see these light bulbs start to click. And, the feedback started to roll in. Well, it's not really quite right. Or that should be a little bit here. Or actually, we don't really do that. That's wrong. And then the next 2 weeks, they'd come back in, they'd see the demo. And again, mind blown, light bulb clicks. And the engagement started to grow. And they started to trust that we were actually taking their opinion and putting it into working software. So it was that result that they saw in front of them that drove their confidence in us. And it, in turn, it drives the confidence in the team. The team feels like they're doing a good job because they're getting great feedback.
Yeah. And this must make people so happy to have their actual feedback have value.
Absolutely. There's so much information and gold in people's heads in terms of how they interact with tools or what they want to get out of it or what their processes are, that you really have to take that first 6 months or even a year to break down those walls of trying to hide those things they didn't think were possible. And there's some crazy ideas that come out there. That's okay. One of the things that we did do really quick was we implemented a tool called Fider, which is a tool that it's kind of like Reddit, but for our product. So our staff can go in and put features in and upvote them. And we can actually see where are the trends. And so we go in and put stuff in there. And then we pick and choose things that are actually really high value that we were thinking were high value. And now we've got 30 or 40 or 50 upvotes and everyone knows. And my favorite part about that is that Aaron likes to use that as his no list. If it's in there and no one's upvoted it, it's not going to float to the top of the list yet.
That makes it easy for him as a product owner.
Absolutely. And there's nothing more satisfying than when a user sees that their idea that they put in has 50 or 30 or 40 people that think it's a really good idea. And then the team can check that off and say, we did that.
How do you ensure you're building the right thing?
It's a great question because we, in this type of development, are often at risk of going down the path of building something very specific for one person. And it's really cool, but it really only uses one person's opinion. Or we could do something where we pave the cow path and, pave over the super windy path that was downtrodden by cattle. And instead, we actually needed to think a bit forward and build a highway. So rather than doing that kind of thing, it's really important that we understand the problem we are trying to solve. And that is at the root of absolutely everything. And secondly, how are we going to measure that problem? How are we going to use real metrics to decide whether or not we've actually addressed the problem? So that's one of the pieces we use. We use some frameworks to do that. So we use Lean, for example, to look at the process before we even start talking about how we're going to apply a technical solution. How can we make this process more efficient? How can we find opportunities, often with the technical team at the table, to lean that process before we go forward? We use things like design thinking as well to break down more of the human-centered components and understand how we can creatively solve problems.
So when you say design thinking, do you work with Cynefin?
We do, yeah. So Cynefin's an awesome conceptual framework that we can use for our decision making and really situate ourselves when we find ourselves facing a big problem. So for those of you who don't know Cynefin's a Dave Snowden product where you break out your problems into 4 quadrants. And those 4 quadrants are obvious, complicated, complex, and chaotic. And by using that framework, you're able to situate yourself and understand how your behaviors may impact the decisions that you make. And taking that down a couple paths, you can understand how you may or may not develop something that's going to add value to that particular problem. And there's certain problems that require different solutions. A chaotic problem, you might just throw something together because you have something really important that you just need to deliver right away. And then you'll reflect on those value metrics and the problem you're trying to solve after. Something that's simple might be a great candidate to look at applying a really comprehensive lean process at the beginning and understanding why you're going through that path and why some of those pieces exist, and then building something. So lots of ways that you can use that framework to help yourself understand where you should add value.
Do you have an example of anything you've used utilizing Cynefin for a product?
I think the best example is we all faced a chaotic problem in March 2020 when we had a pandemic declared. So we all changed our habits and had to decide what we were going to do. But one of the downstream effects of that was that our Mines Digital Services team was building their software for mines, and a $100 million grant was announced to be given to dormant well sites all across BC. And what we had to do was our team had to pivot immediately, and we didn't have time to go and look at, what everyone else had done or how we could do this. We had 14 days to build an application that would administer the ability for the province to dole out $50 million. So that to us became a chaotic problem. We just had to act. So we pulled together things that we'd already done before. We looked at the code that we'd built for things that we'd already used and used successfully and that our developers and our team was really familiar with. We got that out in 14 days. We were able to launch it. We had no complaints. We had over 30 articles praising how BC responded and how they were able to deliver technology that could really make a user feel as though they could get through the process really quickly and really efficiently. And as we worked through that, we were able to shift that problem back to a complicated problem. So it was no longer chaotic. We had some time to breathe after those initial 14 days. And we were able to look at how we wanted to incorporate some of the other tools that other people had done in this stream, how we wanted to actually go talk to users, how we wanted to get back into our regular cadence and our regular cycle and shift back into that place where we were able to analyze and understand and respond before just acting. So it's a really good example of how something can really start off as feeling chaotic, or even in this case, being chaotic with really tight timelines and big dollar values, but it can shift quickly to something that is not. And you could, if you stayed in that mindset of a chaotic environment, keep that command and control style, keep running with the just run down that path. And that can be incredibly destructive. So that's where Cynefin, I think, adds value. You can look at it, understand how you need to respond as a leader in that space by simply situating yourself within that framework.
Perfect. You have any final thoughts?
Just that I think this is the way that we should be doing modern development. And it doesn't matter if it's a focus on the citizen or the resident, or if it's focused on individual users, but that developing in this way and getting really close to user needs, no matter what you're doing, and focusing in on how you're solving the problem and defining the problem, and then working towards how you're going to measure it, it works for everything. It's not just software. It is a perfect model for how you can show results, show something, let it develop a little bit of momentum. It's kind of that flywheel effect. It goes around, it starts to move, and all of a sudden you have that speed, and now you have that momentum. And I think that's where we are right now with our Minds Digital Services teams. We have this incredible momentum, and it's something that we hope that we can continue to build off of.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking your time to share your thoughts. If you have any questions about the podcast, or if you have thoughts, email me at ari.hirschberg@gov.bc.ca. I'd love to hear your feedback, comments, and suggestions. Thank you for listening.